The employment picture is equally serious. Uganda's population currently stands at 45.9 million, yet only 9.4 million are in formal employment. Approximately 700,000 young people enter the labor market every year. While manufacturing, the sector best placed to absorb them, contributes only 8.4% to our country's GDP and employs only 8.3% of the workforce, below the 13% average for least developed countries. The formal economy cannot absorb what the population produces. That's a fact. And the consequence is visible on every street corner and in every family surviving on informal, insecure work. Between 2020 and 2025, an estimated 500,000 Ugandans took up work contracts abroad, most in the Middle East, under conditions widely documented as exploitative. These are not people abandoning a paradise, as is suggested. They are people searching for opportunities that they cannot find at home. A government that exports its youth as cheap labor and then mocks them for leaving has forfeited the moral authority to speak about their economic transformation. What is required is deliberate investment in industrialization, agro-processing, manufacturing, tourism, and genuine support for small and medium enterprises, with success measured by decent livelihoods created, not programs announced. Let me talk about corruption and accountability, which the Honorable Kutesa Kamali is very passionate about, and I applaud her for that. Corruption, colleagues, is still one of the biggest obstacles to Uganda's development. The Inspector General of Government, in their Anti-Corruption Annual Report 2024-2025, estimated that Uganda loses about 10 trillion shillings annually to corruption. 10 trillion shillings per year dissipates. The Auditor General's 2025 Annual Report found unaccounted funds, unsupported expenditure, and procurement irregularities in 72% of audited entities. These are government entities that are audited. Payroll audits continue to uncover thousands of ghost workers. And the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority has reported persistent irregularities in public contracting, including inflated prices and non-competitive awards. The cost is measured in schools not built, medicines not delivered, and opportunities denied. Parliament was told in January of 2026, this year, that only 31% of the Auditor General's recommendations for financial year 2023-2024 had been fully implemented, while more than a third were not implemented at all. The fight against corruption will be judged by stolen funds recovered, audit recommendations implemented, and the investigation, prosecution, and conviction of those responsible, regardless of office or political affiliation. Honorable Speaker, let me speak about human rights, civic freedoms, and justice. A nation's strength, colleagues, is measured not only by economic growth, but by its commitment to constitutional freedoms, human dignity, and the rule of law, an area that we always pay little attention to. The Uganda Human Rights Commission's quarterly report, that's January to April of this year, recorded over 1,200 claimants of arbitrary arrest, torture, enforced disappearance, and lawful detention, a 34% increase on the same period in 2025. So this only gets worse. At least 47 journalists and media workers faced arrest, harassment, and confiscation of their equipment in the preceding 12 months. Arbitrary arrests feed directly into the crisis in our prisons and our courts. Even those produced in courts spend lengthy periods without getting justice. And the proposals by our head of state to abolish bail for a number of offenses does not help matters, colleagues. % on remand, some waiting for years to be tried. For years. By October 2025, the Auditor General found 115 of 413 children in one rehabilitation center had completed their sentences, but were still being held because the system lacked capacity to process their release. This is wrong, colleagues. The chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Mariam Wangadia, has publicly accused some state actors of deliberately weakening this vital institution. She has argued that despite the Commission's critical constitutional mandate to safeguard the rights enshrined in Chapter 4 of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, appointments have been made on political considerations rather than competence. She described some appointees as broke and sickly political failures, suggesting that such appointments have undermined the Commission's effectiveness. This matter ought to be addressed. When we see government officials speaking out, lambasting publicly, this has got to be looked into. I hope government will. Constitutional rights are not privileges granted at government's discretion. They belong to every Ugandan by virtue of the Constitution. And security agencies must operate within the law, with every citizen enjoying equal protection under it. Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues, sometimes government blames opposition, civil society and media houses for making the country look bad. But if we are to be honest with ourselves, we would realize that some government officials contribute a great deal to making our country look bad. Whenever people are abducted and tortured, or when media houses get closed arbitrarily, these violations of the law make it to international press, and you've been seeing international press report about these issues. How then do we expect tourists to come to our country with all these negative situations? We've been dealing with a situation where most of the world thought numerous people were dying of Ebola in Uganda, which of course was not true. But travel advisories were issued, and many would-be tourists cancelled their visits to Uganda, which affected our tourism. And as we clarify to the world that the Ebola situation in Uganda was blown out of proportion and misunderstood, and I think government, have been seeing government officials speak out. I saw Alan Kasuja, Uganda Media Center, ED and others, saying, look, the problem is not as has been described in this our country, which is a good thing, that you get to defend our country and the facts come out. Because people think Ugandans are dropping dead of Ebola every day. That's not true. So as we continue to clarify and defend our country, which we must be able to do as government, we find ourselves having to deal with international press reports about violations of the law. So we need to address all these issues. Potential investors want to come and set up business in Uganda to employ our young people. But this can easily get discouraged because of what they see and hear. This hurts our economy and it affects all of us, colleagues. Civil society organizations have been targeted for suspension and closure. Most of them have had their accounts frozen by the state. No explanations, no court orders. Why does government target people and entities who point out the ills in our governance instead of addressing those ills? We have to build this our country together. So, dissenting voices should not be targeted for persecution. We need to listen to the issues of concern being raised, and then we work towards fixing those issues. Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues, we held our national election at the start of this year, but there are still many unanswered questions. Why does the military continue to interfere with our elections? This did not just happen to we opposition competitors, by the way. I saw a number of colleagues from the NRM raising similar concerns in their constituencies as well. Why hasn't government accounted for the billions spent on the biometric voter verification kit, which did not function on election day? Why hasn't the Electoral Commission publicized the declaration of results forms which they based on to declare results? Colleagues, our country needs to heal from the tumult that has become of our elections. But we can only do so, we can only heal when these questions are sufficiently responded to.